Welcome to Adulting in the Modern World with Donna and Sahar, a podcast dedicated to help women catalyze their own transformation and engage in their evolution in a conscious way. Two transformational coaches share tools, processes, practices, and wisdom to support you in designing your life in a fun, joy-filled, and abundant way. This is for the woman who is invested in her evolution in an intentional way, takes responsibility for her emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, and financial wellness. This is for the woman that honors the value of wisdom and growth in community. Welcome to Adulting in the Modern World.
Today, we're actually really excited to be talking about a few key topics and concepts that Donna and I have been thinking about, we work inside of, and we feel that our work lives in the center of as well, which is the question of evolution, the question of how we evolve and how we change in terms of the legacy that we are creating with the body of our work, not in the sense of your career or, your finances, although those are things that they are questions and conversations we have as well, but it's the legacy work that you're leaving for your blood, for your ancestors that have passed, in terms of the changes that you're embodying in this lifetime. And then for those that are your descendants, those that are to come in the future. And even if you don't have your own children or don't plan to have your own children, I think that you still impact your lineage by the work that you do on yourself, by the transformation that we do. And so today we're really going to deep dive into that. We're going to deep dive into what it's like in terms of the process of transformation. How do we identify and understand ourselves when we birth ourselves brand new? And also we're going to talk about what that means in terms of the impact that has in our legacy, the legacy that we're creating and the legacy that we're leaving behind. I know Donna has some really, really exciting stuff to share about this. The tools and the methodologies that she uses really help with this, and she's been noticing it with her clients in the rapid transformational therapy processes that she's been engaging in.
Absolutely. And as we evolve into the new self, that's one of the topics that the sub themes that surrounds today's topic. I've been noticing it in my own life, and in discussion with Sahar, she's been noticing it too in hers, that there's something transpiring right now, and it is globally. I'm hearing it from not only friends and family, but clients as well, that we have been kind of preparing ourselves and testing ourselves for the last number of years. This is not just COVID related and quarantine related, but we've been in the process of transformation for a number of years, and I find that it kind of got compacted in the last 9 or 10 months. And what's happening now is we're coming out of the other side of our personal growth journey, which always continues. It's a journey that we'll go through forever, for our entire lifetime. But now, doesn't it feel, I'll pose it as a question to listeners, how does it feel for you right now? Don't you feel that you are literally in a different space than you were a year ago, personally, in your evolution process? And for a large number of you, finding that as you evolve into this new version of yourself, there are certain patterns, certain tools, techniques, certain things that you find that you're probably needing to do on a more consistent basis in order to maintain and achieve that level of evolution, processing, transformation that you've been undergoing. So I've noticed that in my own journey as well, that there's certain processes that I've had to put into place, that I've wanted to put into place. And now they're finding their way, they're finding their footing, they're finding their grounding into my life. So to not be vague about it, for instance, one of those things is creating a daily plan, almost like a master plan for my day on a daily basis, and then on a weekly basis, so that I can check in with myself literally, whether it's my personal work, my energy work, which is also personal, but affects my surroundings, affects my environment and the people that I'm with, right? If I'm at a healthy, energetic level and I feel full, I'm coming from that full cup, then that overflows to the people around me in a very good way. So I check in with my actual, work. I check in with my energy level, energy systems, check in with my body systems. And so that's now happening on a daily basis and creating a flow. And we've talked about flow. We'll definitely spend much more time speaking about it again. Flow is when we're in that state of absolute connection with our divine self, shall I say, with our true soul's purpose. And things are absolutely flowing in the direction that we feel is right for us. So let me take it back now to where I started, evolving into the new self. Sahar, what are some of the new programs or tools that you've been using to maintain? Because, we're coming out of a new year. So a lot of people with resolutions. This year was the first year I didn't set any, and actually it's been even more productive because I'm doing this process of working on a consistent level of progression. So what are some of the things that you're doing to manage, maintain, and even accelerate your growth process right now?
That's a great question, especially for people who want to up level or are high performers or who want to grow to the next incarnation. Like if you've achieved a lot of your goals that you set, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, and you look back and you're like, what now? I have all this energy to pour into. What direction am I going to pour it into? And I found myself kind of in that place of a really new place for this year. And so some of the things that has been helpful for me is to really stay focused on the more shorter term. Like I'm still thinking about the long term, but the long term then gets projectized into the small short term. So I noticed that before I used to just, have a lot of like my intentions in the new year and say I'd like to have this, this, this. But what I'm finding this year for myself is I'm really all about the habits. So I'm about building the habits for success. What are the habits that I want to build that create the identity and personality? We've been using that word a lot in our previous episodes because it's so important. Your identity is the story that you want to tell of yourself, right? So when I say, okay, if I'm not happy about the stories that I've been telling myself for the past little while, or if those stories took me to a certain place, but it kind of like took me, to a level that I'm now wanting to go beyond. So how do I get there? And so for me, it's really lives in the habits, Donna. What I've been doing for myself is actually this week is our 6th week. It's our 6th episode in terms of our podcast as well. And that correlates to the 40 days. So for us to show up consistently, that was part of my goal. So I set these little mini posts. I set myself weekly goals. I set myself daily goals. And what I've really needed to do on a daily basis in order to up level and stay committed to my consistency habits is to show up daily and journal. So every single day, like I'll find moments in the evening to journal, just to take a few notes of how was my day, how was, and just have that inner conversation with myself. It's like having, if you're in a boxing ring or if you're running a marathon or something and you have your coach on the side, like there with you, motivating you, encouraging you to keep going. Because when we push past, like I remember the 3rd week I felt and I observed and I watched all like the self-sabotaging behaviors come up. But because I knew it was coming and I was prepared to watch for them, they didn't take me down. And instead, I actually amplified a positivity mindset. I actually amplified a neutral mindset of like, okay, I'll just observe what's happening, but I'm not going to give into it. So I would say that those are some of the key things. consistency in the habits that you want to build. Show up on a daily basis, really make it be micro. If you want to make, $500,000 a year, you break that down into smaller chunks, and you start to say, what are the habits? What are the principles? What are the knowledge, skill sets? What are those things that I need in order to become that being? So if we want to become a more expansive version of ourselves, Donna and I talk about this of like, don't start from your small self and expand big. Start from your big self and come back into your current self, and then work that, like, that reverse engineering. So that's what I'm finding to be super helpful, is I keep expanding and expanding my vision of who I desire to be and how I desire to be. And then I work backwards on my day-to-day life in terms of like, how can I bring that into myself now? How can I bring that into myself now? And so I'm finding that to be super effective. What about yourself, Donna?
I love that. I'm working in the same manner. And Sahar and I, our listeners don't know this, but I'll share with them a little secret. We mastermind. We mastermind on a more than once a week basis, but I would say that's a minimum. For instance, I have another business that I also work on, and we mastermind with one of my colleagues once a week, and with Sahar it's multiple times, so I'm really lucky. But mastermind with people that Sahar mentions the word up leveling. How can I up level if I'm not literally surrounding myself and in the vibration of people that are and I would say actually at is fine at the same level, but really start to bring yourself to areas where you're networking with people at higher levels or with more experience or more exposure, because that's how you're going to learn, and you're going to learn from their mistakes. I find people that have made it where you want to be are very happy to share where they've gone wrong so that you don't make the same mistakes, or at least if you do, you know how to get out of it. And so it's a really brilliant way to level yourself up. And I want to share, because we've kind of been on a roll with this. My teacher, Marissa Peer from Rapid Transformational Therapy, has 17 rules of the mind. So I've been sharing a few of them here and there, and today two apply. And so one of them applies to actually creating the blueprint of your mind. So here's her rule of the mind. Your thoughts form a blueprint that your mind and body work to make your reality. Your thoughts form a blueprint that your mind and body work to make a reality. Yeah. So where I'm going with this is that Sahar made a mention of, she was referring to athletics and having a coach. And I personally have consistently worked with coaches over the last 15 years. Professional coaches, life coaches, different types of business coaches. And I would say that's one of the key things for success. One of the key points is to work with someone, whether you pay them or not. There's a lot of free advice out there too, but if you can pay for a coaching program once a month where you are going to be filtering in those thoughts, because if you look at this, you're creating a blueprint for how your mind works, and then your mind and body respond. So they give you the feedback to make that blueprint a reality. So it's this constant, cycle that's happening. So if you've got a coach that is helping you train just like an athlete would, and they're helping you train in the way you think, the way you act, the way you feel, then you're starting to create that new blueprint, that new reality. And the other rule of the mind that I want to touch on is the mind cannot hold conflicting beliefs or thoughts. They cancel each other out. I'll repeat, the mind cannot hold conflicting beliefs or thoughts. They cancel each other out. And for me, this plays into the conversation that Sahar started with of legacy. How does that tie into legacy? Well, if I'm holding a belief that's from the past, from trauma, from other generations, from, wounding of my parents, then that's conflicting with the me that I want to be, with my true self, my true desires, my dream self. And so my mind, it's confused by these conflicting beliefs. So what happens? They actually cancel each other out, and it negates it. It becomes a zero. So where am I going? Am I going to past trauma? Am I going to my dream self? I don't know where to go. And it just kind of, they bump into one another. So that's where this, formation of a new blueprint really comes into play.
Wow. So that's so powerful because that principle that Donna just mentioned, that cannot hold conflicting beliefs or thoughts. So that is so important. I've listened to this be shared in, Christy Marie Sheldon talked about it. My trading, like Mark Douglas talks about it in trading. So when it's such a gem. It's such a gem. It's one of the key wisdom pieces that I've been working with for the past 3 years. Rumi has that quote as well of, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and found all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. So that's why it's a lot of it, in order to catapult, is you need to do the inner work. And so when Donna highlights the first rule that she said, where your mind creates a blueprint that your body creates your reality, that speaks to what we talked about in our last episode about the law of radiation. So most people are like, I'm so disappointed that I keep attracting these types of relationships, or why am I not like, or if it might be a health thing, or it might be a financial thing, or whatever it is that you start to notice in your life and you're really frustrated about, and you feel like it doesn't match the desired reality that you have within yourself. So your conscious mind might say, I desire to make $10,000 a month or something like that. I just love to have something concrete, simple. Or your conscious mind might say, I desire to have, a really loving relationship or something. But in your subconscious mind, in your blueprint, your original blueprint, there's a lot of beliefs that are directing your reality to be something completely of the opposite nature. So what's really important is that you take the energy out. So when Donna said that they cancel each other out, if the other thoughts and imprints are stronger, it won't necessarily cancel it out. It just won't give energy to the other new belief to be rooted. So it'll override it and it'll overtake it. And so that's why we talk about daily practices and habits and consistency, because it's great to say that, you want to become XYZ, but if you don't hone that into your body through these practices that we talk about, you're not going to see the results to be lasting. That's why they call the third Monday of January, a Blue Monday, is because a lot of people set New Year's resolutions, but they don't have the follow through, and they don't realize that that 21-day mark is really when you start to break down, and the energy from the old will take over unless you have the consciousness and the support system to overcome it. And that is the time when that catalyst happens and that transformation happens. So when we use the word transformation, that's what we're really talking about, because if energy can be created or destroyed, it is transmuted, it is transformed. So we want to draw the energy out from the old stuff and put it into the new stuff. So those are gems, Donna. Those are some of the core principles for being successful and for growing and for up leveling. Like, everybody needs to highlight that.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens, I find, you mentioned that 21-day mark where things kind of could come to a screeching halt, and you have to make a choice. You make a choice, and Sahar's laughing behind the scenes because, we've personally recognized this point within the 40-day process where you get to day 20, 21, and 22, and it's like, how much do I really want this? Do I deserve it? Am I worthy of the result that I'm seeking? And so you really come up against old beliefs, and things start to trigger you. And I love that word, because if you're triggered, then you have a choice. And that's what I'm seeing both in my therapy practice and just, in general, working with clients, is that when the trigger arrives and it's sparked within you, you actually have a choice. You have a choice to be able to stop Okay, actually, first you have a choice to just go with it. So go with the old habits and react in the old ways and go in that really comfortable zone of being, unhappy or having the result that you don't want, and then kind of smacking your head against the wall, wondering why you're not getting the results you want. So you can go with the old patterning, or the trigger happens and you can stop. And once you stop, I mean, just listen to my voice, you stop and you pause. So then you reflect. Am I going to go down the old pathway because it was serving me for some reason? And some of the ways it serves you is that it protects you, it's comfortable, it's what you know. And so we don't beat ourselves up over that. It's all that we know. And then there's the stop and change direction. And that's the one I'm loving these days, because here you have three choices that I've given you. You can go with the old patterning, you can stop and pause and reflect and choose, and you can train yourself to stop and go in the new direction. And once that starts happening, we talked about day 21. Once that starts happening, day 22, 23, 30, 35, 40, 60, well, you know what? You've created a whole new pathway, a whole new highway that your brain is now going to be traveling on. And there are very few U-turn exits for you to go back the other way. You are going to be almost smooth sailing for the rest of your time.
Anais Nin has a quote that says, "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud is more painful than the risk it took to blossom." And so I share that because what comes to mind as Donna is sharing this is a lot of us, when she says the word choice, um, we can choose to just stay stuck in the way that we are. We can choose to not necessarily evolve. And it goes back to that piece of the word evolution. We can choose to pass down the same patterns and habits that was passed down to us over and over and over again. We can stay stuck in that repetition mode. To me, I love preaching to people that I work with of like, create your own catalyst and light yourself up on fire and phoenix, because then you get to grow more rapidly than waiting for a crisis to hit. I think we shared this in one of our other programs before, where we said, a lot of people, COVID hit and, the lockdown and everything. And this created the circumstance and scenario for a lot of people to pause, to confront themselves, to look at themselves in the mirror, all the things that we used for our ego to protect ourselves or to build up our identity that like wasn't necessarily built on our soul self. And it's forced us to look at that, and it's forced us to confront that and be like, oh my God, so these things are not really who I am. Or if they're taking away from you your sense of self-worth, if you rooted it in those external things, etc., you're like, oh my gosh, how do I? And so it creates a crisis, and crisis creates that opportunity that Donna just said of, do you choose which direction you want to go into? It gives you a chance of making choice. It gives you a moment of pause and reflection. And so I am such a proponent of catalyzing change consciously in your life versus waiting for crisis to happen to incite that for yourself. Yeah, like I just wanted to take it there. For a lot of people who are wanting to up level, they are self-starters in that way. And I also want to say, sometimes you can be progressing and you can be growing, and your inner critic, because it's so comfortable in the old ways, that it'll actually make your mood and your emotions feel like crap. So like, you could be hitting your targets, you can be building the new habit, you can be expanding, you can be manifesting your soul dreams and desires. And inside you're like, why don't I feel good? I've heard this from close people around me, actually, who are just manifesting like really big dreams. And they're like, why do I feel like shit? Like, I feel worse than I did when I wasn't even like attracting and manifesting these. So I just want to also say that if you're don't go by your mood as an indicator of your truth and reality when you're undergoing changes, because I'm telling you that might be one of the ways that part of you wants to keep you stuck and small and in the old ways, just because of comfort.
self-sabotage anyone. In one of my masterminds this week, that concept came up. We can very well know exactly what to do. You can take every single tip from this recording and all previous recordings and apply them in your life, and you will still, I promise you, 100% guarantee that you will come up against triggers and traumas because they've been encoded in us since birth, and if you believe, beyond. And that's okay. I can say that with a smile on my face. That's okay, because once you learn how to navigate those waters, it is much less scary. And so then they seem more like speed bumps instead of enormous gaping holes in the road. And so and what Sahar touched on is brilliant as we start to wrap up this conversation of how does one evolve into the new self. You can really start to manifest, like she said, things that you've dreamt of your whole life, and they appear, and you are very unclear as to why you're not as happy as you thought you would be. And there's a few answers to that, and maybe we touch on that in another episode. But one of them is kind of confronting, I've wanted this, now it's here. So it could be an issue of, do I deserve this? Am I worthy of this? Maybe I actually wanted something different. And so there's so many questions someone could ask in that regard. But be okay with coming up against those issues. And Sahar's words of wisdom of not necessarily going into the emotion there, I totally, totally agree. Like, accept what's come into your life, notice the emotion, learn how to ride with it, and really be persistent in the pursuit of what is going to bring you closer to your clarity, your soul self, your connection to your divine self. What does that mean for you? And really getting clear on what's the picture I have of my life? Who is this new self that I'm evolving into? And what does she need? How does she act? Who is she? What does she look like? How does she feel? Because sometimes I need to get into that mind frame of, who am I becoming, so that I can become her. Because if I'm not there yet, or at least I don't recognize it yet, I need to start developing the habits of what this person looks and feels like when she arrives. And isn't it possible, Sahar, that sometimes that truly magical, wonderful dream arrives in our lives, and we somehow find a way to sabotage the goodness that's come into our life because we actually don't know how to handle the good.
Right. And that's why we're teaching these concepts, tools, and principles for those who are wanting to up level, to transform, etc., and grow, because we're just going to say, like, these are things that will come on the path. So when they come, be aware. Awareness is key. Awareness is key. Reflection. So there's 4 stages of transformation. I mean, the different people identified in different ways, but it's awareness, it's reflection in the moment, being able, so when you're in a pattern or something, you start to pay attention, right? And that's what the 40 days do for us, is we start to actually pay that really micro attention to it. So awareness, change, reflection, change in the moment, and then integration. So you have to first, like, you'll notice yourself. So in the 40-day practice, the first 10 days or something, you'll start to reflect and notice these things, the habits that you're looking to transform, they'll start showing up. And then you start to reflect on it. That's why we preach journaling so much, because you sit with that and you observe the patterns and the habits and the belief systems that are wanting to basically surface, so that you can recognize them for clearing, transforming. And then the third thing is, you now have the capacity, because you've been reflecting, you now have the capacity to watch it when it shows up in your life. So when self-sabotage peeks its head in your life, you're like, oh, I know that, because that's how I sabotage myself when I'm uncomfortable when it comes to growth. So you catch yourself and you change in the moment. That's when you do that pivot. If you do that over time, you start to build that habit and that muscle as your new way of being. And then that integrates into your personality, and that becomes your future self, basically. And so that's that. I just really want to say that having the tools, the awareness, and the knowledge when you're wanting to up level, these pieces are key to support you so that you can keep on going and not stop on your tracks when your self-sabotage patterns show up. So I think that this has been an amazing conversation. We really hope that you got some great nuggets out of it and that it helps you on your journey of personal growth and transformation. And just to remember that as we choose to evolve, we will be confronted with our past self. And, we do have to do that transformation work in terms of creating a new blueprint so that our body can create that new reality. So we're sending you off with lots of love. Have a great day.